We're zeroing in on the tractors a little bit, but certainly your interests are even broader than that. You've done some books, some work with combines, for example.
Yeah, we've done combines, we've done four-wheel drives. I've done some old things on motorcycles and travel, so we didn't bring those, but we got the red stuff here.
You've been a gearhead from the days of your youth, have you not? You came by that naturally.
Yes, I did. I tormented my father for years to buy me a motorcycle, and my uncle finally had one he'd sell for 25 bucks. So I got myself a motorcycle and then gearhead after that.
You run hard. You're busy all the time. I don't know how you do it because research is required for the kind of product that you turn out. And that's time consuming, is it not?
It is. And one of the really cool things, and I think those of you that are into history know that, is now the internet's really changed what you can find out. And you can get into archives. I mean, there's Google, but you go a couple of layers deeper. With a computer, you can learn almost anything now, which is a curse for a writer.
I bet it is. Well, let's wander over and start our discussion here.
All right.
We took folks through the early years yesterday.
We did. We're going to the second part of the 20th century today. So before we start on this, I realized I was remiss, and I missed a really key thing yesterday. I mean, I'm a writer, not a talker, so I hope that y'all forgive me. But I want to mention in our new book, Farmall Century, we work with Guy Fay, a name that many of you know. He writes many books. He worked at the Historical Society of Wisconsin for many years, knows all the secrets that are in that. He found another tractor. Who knows what the first farm tractor was, gasoline powered? Come on, somebody. The Hart Power was the first one to be called a gas tractor. The very first was built by John Froelich.
Who?
John Froelich is his name. He was in Froelich, Iowa, and he developed a tractor, and it's widely considered the first viable gasoline tractor. Well, Guy came to me and said, hey, that isn't the first one. And by the way, Froelich went to work for Waterloo Boy. You all know where Waterloo Boy went. I'm not saying anymore. The one that Guy found is not green. It became red.
Wow.
So the first farm tractor, first gasoline-powered farm tractor, 4 years before Froelich, is red.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Is there more to that story?
I'm
Get
not
the book, right?
I'm not telling you. Got to get the book.
I understand.
And it's Guy's
totally.
story to tell. So I wanted to slide that in.
You know, I almost broke out into a sweat just looking at the cultivator here. I can remember so vividly crawling through the field under the heat of that summer sun, just crawling. After lunchtime, you'd had lunch, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd start to get just a little bit woozy, just a little bit, huh? Oh man, it was tough. You'd fight it. And of course, Dad had no tolerance, no understanding for the fact that you stayed out a little bit late the night before.
It's true. It's true.
Some of you walked that path, I bet, didn't you?
So where we're going to start today is, if you were here yesterday, we talked about the F-12. And IH had decided they needed to go after, I looked it up this morning because I wanted to know, they figured there was 4 million farms that had horses, not tractors. So their first effort to get to those folks was the F-12. It was smaller, it was cheaper. This one was their next effort. This one has a really fascinating history in that, and Guy Fay, I got to give credit where it's due, wrote about this in his book about prototypes. So Alice Chalmers B, you guys remember that little tractor, right? What looks similar on this to the B? It's this torque tube right here down the middle. So the power of this tractor, I'm wandering around, I'm probably in trouble with the camera guys. The way this tractor was built was using a torque tube down the middle. When the Alice Chalmers B came out, it was before this tractor, and IH was freaking out because they're like, there's that little tractor, that's what we were trying to build, and somebody else did it. So they did this. The engineers could not figure out any other way to make it with the CultiVision and all the things they wanted without the torque tube. So they had to pay off Alice Chalmers for the patent rights. So that was, anyway.
And what year would that have been approximately, Lee?
39 is when it came
yeah.
out, yeah. This also was a bigger deal than the M and an H. We all know the M's and H's sold more, but the Farmall A, IH was very excited about these small things. They made a huge presentation and just a gala event out of the introduction
Why
of
do
this
you
tractor.
say it was a bigger deal?
It was a bigger launch.
Only at that time.
At that time,
deal.
the H&M sold more, became a much bigger part of it. But when they launched this, that was a huge deal.
But the production of the M and H coincided with the beginning of the production of this, right?
It did. But they launched this first. They launched this in July.
Anything else we need to talk about on the A?
Ray Loewy.
Oh, Raymond Loewy,
We need
the
to talk
designer.
about Raymond Loewy.
When you're talking about this style,
Yeah.
am I correct?
Correct.
We visited about Raymond yesterday.
We
We
did.
talked about everything else he gave to the world, such as that curvy Coca-Cola bottle, the design, the scheme of the Air Force One jet, the locomotives of the 40s and 50s, that sleek front end of those.
Yep, Pennsylvania Railroad, he did a bunch. He did the Disney monorail. He did something else, which I forgot. But Ray Loewy was brought in, as we talked about yesterday. And just to back up just a little bit, in the 1930s, industrial designers, Ray was one of them, one of the leaders of that, became very important because manufacturers realized that if they made their machines beautiful, they sold more. And for Ray Loewy, Ray's big break was the Sears Cold Spot.
The cold spot.
The
The
fridge.
refrigerator?
Yes, the Sears Cold Spot fridge. And he restyled that, and they sold a lot. It was millions, I don't remember the number. But that put him on the map. And then he was brought in, at first with IH, to do trucks. So I think it's the 37 line. If you look, it's got this sleek nose on the truck, and that was his design. Then they hired him to do the ag tractors.
Did he work with any other farm equipment manufacturer?
He did not that I recall. He did not.
He had a relationship with someone at IH, did he not? You mentioned that?
He did. Fowler, McCormick, and he were buddies. And, Ray was, became famous, was a very stylish guy, moved in big money circles, so did Fowler. And it makes sense the two of them would be pals. And that's how he came to IH. And of course, if you look at, look at the F-12, there's the design before Ray, and look at this. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I personally think that when you say tractor to the general population, this is what a lot of people think because it's so iconic.
Absolutely. Well, the right-minded individuals think of this.
Yes.
Let's move on to the M over here. Look here. The insert is in place. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you wound up missing one of these when you had to do a restoration? Yeah. When I got my Super H, when I bought it at my mom and dad's auction, of course the insert wasn't there. So, I was looking around for it. About 7 to 8 years later, I'm standing in the old crib on the home place, and I look up, and there it was. I must have screamed loudly enough they could hear me in town, because there was that insert that had been there all the years before when Dad took it out, hung it up on a piece of baling wire up at the top of the crib.
So this piece, the reason this one is here is these cool logos, which are the M&W company. Show of hands, who knows what the M&W company is? All right, good. That's like half the crowd. This is a knowledgeable crowd.
We're going to have, by the way, a great M&W display at the Half Century of Progress.
Fantastic, with Bill's stuff.
Bill Burnham will be there with a bunch of his tractors. I think he has one tractor that has 21.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, 21 M&W inventions on it. Elmo Miners, down there in central Illinois, was the fella. He, by the way, was at our very first Half Century of Progress.
Really?
And then I think he was there again in 2005 or 7.
Oh, wonderful.
Before he passed. I'm sorry.
So, no, it's good. It's good. I love it. We're not done. Don't be going to the next tractor yet. So, Elmo Miners, who Max referenced, Elmo Miners in Art Warsaw figured out that the Farmall M didn't have enough speeds. And he's like, look, I stop, I shift, I can't get it, you know, I need to go up to fourth, the thing will hardly go. So they took Elmo's M, took it apart, put it in an elevator to an old office building, put it in the basement, put it back together, and then powered the transmission. They took an electric motor off a grain elevator, powered the transmission, and started fiddling. And they fiddled for 2 years to build a 9-speed transmission. They dropped basically a 2-speed unit in there that would make first through fourth, could be first through fourth high or first through fourth low. I hope I got that right. Somebody in this room will correct me, right? So when Elmo and Art were done with that, those guys were the world's best promoters. So they took the tractor out of the basement, put it back together, taped on it cardboard, said M&W, and went to all the Illinois IH dealerships and said, look, you can sell this to your customers. And it was an absolute smash. So
They actually had their own outdoor exposition, and I believe they started it 70 years ago this year and competed with the Farm Progress Show.
Yeah, you're right.
Which also started in 1953.
Yeah, it was 1953.
So they drew a huge crowd. In fact, my colleague Orion Samuelson made his first public appearance after going to WGN in Chicago at the M&W Power Show.
Yeah,
That's where he was introduced.
Yeah, we have a picture in the book of Orion at that show. So yeah, and their shows were huge. The first show they had, they advertised in a paper, we found some ads, and they had, I want to say it was around 10,000 people show up. So the shows became, they would bring all the manufacturers' new stuff, and they would bring their stuff, and you could go drive a new M, and then they'd have their M with all the goodies and take it out. And they had M's making 120 horsepower. So they were,
think about that.
They were good at tuning motors, yeah.
That M&W throttle shows up right up there at the top, very prominent. Of course, that helps solve a problem because you would often find that throttle hopping out of the notches.
Yes.
Many of us have experienced that on a tractor ride or at a plow day, but that M&W throttle helped solve that problem.
They solved so many little problems. This one, interestingly, has a Balin 6-speed.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
I just learned yesterday, so the Balin was only made for a short time. It would give you the additional gear, but the story I was told here's something I learned today. The story I was told is that somebody drove one of these. It was so fast, they said, that they went off the end of their field into a ditch, broke the tractor in half, and they sued Balin. At which point Balin said, I'm done. And that was it. So I don't know that that's true. That's a story I was told. I haven't done my research.
Sounds good. I'm sure we'll find somebody that can either support it or refute it.
Somebody here knows. Great story.
All right, let's move on over here to this M.
This M. So.
Experimental, it says.
It is. So M&W's doing what they're doing, right? Power-up kits, more gears. And at first, the IH dealerships loved it. At some point, IH was like, I'm not so cool with that. And they sent notes to their dealerships saying the 9-speed transmission ruined the transmission and da-da-da-da-da, trying to suppress it. They didn't. People still bought it. But the engineers were paying attention. This is an experimental 1950 M8 tractor, and it has a 2-speed gearbox in it. So there is a high and low range. This was built by the factory and cast by the factory. And those of you that know your M's, there's all kinds of weirdness going in the back.
There is.
But IH, whether they knew that they needed more horsepower and they needed more gears, they probably did. But they also knew M&W was building stuff they better answer to. And this was part of their effort to match that.
You're right. It is a little bit funky again there, isn't it?
Yeah, you probably know well enough.
I noticed there's no PTO shaft.
There's an independent PTO on it that is unique to this tractor. there's an independent there is an independent PTO. The owner, Andrew Dawson, showed me this either yesterday or the day before. There is an IPTO on it, which this is, those of you that are everybody here who's very knowledgeable knows that independent PTO didn't come till later. So they had one they were testing, and I will not talk about the technology. Find Andrew, he can tell you. But it is unique. So this, and the amazing thing, it's cast. So if you look at it, they had to make all those sand castings and all this to build this tractor. It's just incredible what they did for something they never built.
That platform does look quite a bit different, doesn't it, on there?
Yeah.
How do you sort out, when you're doing research, how do you sort out what's something that an individual farmer did to his tractor as opposed to a shop that was going to mass produce them? And I ask that question because you know, so many farmers did something of their own to tailor that tractor to their own interests.
Yeah, and it's tough. If they were really good at it, the thing is, and I've talked to people who were on the line and worked on these, they're building these things every day. And they're especially this era, right? There were, I don't even know how many a day, but they built around 400,000 of these. So you know there's dealers screaming for these tractors, and if they don't have this magneto or that carburetor, or they're gonna bolt on this thing, whatever gets it out the door. So first, on that question, you might have IHs that it's factory, but it's not exactly what all the restoration people say, but it might be correct. Now, if it's farmerized and they did it really well, I don't know. I'm not the one to know. You can look. One of the great resources, and we do put it in our books, is original archival photos. And that means these are photographs taken at the time. And is that the complete authority? No. But it's not a picture of a restored tractor. It's a picture of a machine, say this in 1950 or 1951. And those photographs are really important historical documents. And we use a lot of those in our books because of that.
I have often been so impressed when I've seen these basic models of the H and the M morphed into something in the construction industries, and quite often by another company. Had nothing to do with International Harvester. They made a roller, they made a grader. Talk about that a bit, would you?
They made all kinds of things. Yeah, and we found, in fact, there's a C. If I'd have remembered, I'd be showing everybody that came to the booth. I found a C that is a high sprayer. I found it in a random archive in Illinois. I've certainly never seen one. Somebody here probably has, but maybe not. And it's probably 14 feet tall and this bizarre configuration, I think for grapes, don't quote me on that.
14 feet.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. You have to climb a ladder to get on top.
I'd be a little bit nervous operating at that height.
Oh, you know, and who knows about this manufacturer.
I was on a tractor ride in Missouri on a stormy Saturday several years ago, and we were riding over those hills of northwest Missouri. I looked across there on that high crop tractor and I realized the highest point out here is this. I was pretty darn uncomfortable until we got that ride over.
Yeah, no, you don't want to be the high point, especially if there's lightning involved.
Are we ready to move on?
We are. Oh, one more thing from this era I just about forgot. So we're in 1950. IH at this time is super, super interesting. And I'm going to try to boil this down quick. So if you think about coming out of the war, they had limited supplies, huge demand, huge problems actually supplying the machines. And some people couldn't even buy them. You had to, in the heat of the war, you had to get a permit to buy, from the government, to buy a tractor.
And some took delivery under the cover of darkness.
Yes.
Secret. I mean,
yes.
Acquired it, slipped it into the shed, tried to hide it.
For sure, and used stuff like old regulars and F-20s were going for 2 and 3 times the value on auctions. So it was a tough time. So the company is dealing with that. And then they've had no materials, they've had huge demand through the war ends, and everybody, especially the dealers, is like, what's next? What do you have for us? And one of the things they did in 1945, a lot of you have seen, they had a show at Hinsdale. And instead of showing new production stuff, they showed experimental. And there was TD-24, which was a mess and not ready to go. There was a Cub, which I was just talking to a fella here who knew him, and he's like, that didn't even look like a Cub. They rolled things out early to try and for their dealers, to let their dealers know, hey, we got new things coming. So they're pushing through this era. They also have new leadership, and they also decide they need to get into new markets. They get into fridges, they get into construction equipment, all this stuff. And those moves, while they made some very neat machinery, the fridges are particularly interesting. My good friend Sarah Tomac just did a new book about that. It's over at IH Gear. Please check it out. It's really cool. I saw it this morning. But the fridges were beautifully engineered. They last forever. If you have one, it's probably still running the way it did, what is that, 70 years ago now? Mm-hmm. But it was a poor use of their resource. They didn't have enough distribution. They had to eventually dump the whole line and sell it to Sears. So construction, the TD4 was kind of similar. So this was the era in my mind where they started to make some mistakes that would lead to the debt and issues that they would unfortunately carry into the 80s.
How many of the dealerships carried appliances along with the farm equipment? Our local one did. I mean, you went down to the other end of the building, and I think it was almost a separate building now that I think about it, but it was adjacent to the farm equipment dealership.
It was there, and that was part of the problem. Who's shopping for a fridge at the IH dealership? And they also delivered. They had these beautiful trucks that were Ray Loewy designed that delivered fridges to your house. So super fun.
I never knew that. You mentioned, it's kind of interesting, you mentioned Sears and International Harvester. There was a tie for these companies going way back, wasn't there?
Yes, there was, in that Ray Loewy designed, of course, the Sears Cold Spot. So Ray's contract, which we found for the book, nobody had, well, to my knowledge, nobody had seen that. We found the contract between Ray Loewy and IH, and in that, it says he can't design fridges. That was off hands because Sears wouldn't let him. Sears was like, hey, we're going to do this. So.
You think of the giants that those two companies were in the day and in the same, headquartered in the same city.
Yes, yes.
560. Oh. Not just a 560 diesel. And a magnificent restoration by an FFA member. Sam Hoops. Where are you, Sam? You around here?
He's right here.
There we go. Sam's in the orange vest. If you've looked at this tractor, give him a round of applause for the great restoration that he's done on this. I had the chance to visit with him and ask him some questions about it, and it's just real neat to see what he has done with his granddad's tractor. That's what lights my fire. He got it after his grandfather passed away and has really faithfully restored this for the FFA competition. He won the state contest, and he's in the national competition. I don't know if you know what goes into that contest, but it's very extensive record keeping. The judges want to know what you did, who helped you, what was spent, how the parts might have been acquired perhaps from someone else.
My understanding, the history of the tractor also is part of it. Is that right, Sam? Yeah,
judges won't see the tractor in person, right?
Yeah.
So they get to see pictures and hear your story. They'll interview you. Sam.
Yeah, it's a fantastic program, and this is a fantastic restoration.
It was a model with which there were some challenges.
There were, and I could talk about the 560 for the entire hour. I won't do that to y'all. As everyone, most people probably know, they rushed this. They were, remember we were talking about 1945. They're like releasing experimentals. They needed a new tractor. They needed more horsepower. They needed a 6-cylinder. They developed all that. That rear end is awfully close to the old M, and they put them in the fields, and a very few of them failed. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's like, oh, they have bad rear ends. They had a very few, but IH, being IH, recalled thousands of them. I heard stories from people that said the overtime, if you worked at a dealership, that on the overtime alone they made from IH putting these things in, they bought a house. Because it was just so much money. So they spent a ton of money, and it was a big black eye for the company. So the 560, talk around. There's plenty of people that use them, and they were fine, especially with the fix. But that hurt them a little bit.
So standing at the half-century of progress a few years ago, I was visiting with retired International Harvester engineer Lloyd Eidelman. Lloyd had worked on the combines in the latter years of his career, but we were standing by the front of my 560. I was telling Sam about this a few minutes ago, and Lloyd was pointing to that grill, and he said, originally, The design was to have these bars as separate pieces, bolted into the outside frame.
Yeah.
Lloyd said that a cost containment official with the company came through the plant, looked at that and said, why isn't that all one piece?
Yeah.
And so before they brought it out, it was.
I did not know that. I do know from my book, this is not Ray Loewy design. They had gotten rid of Ray. So this was internal IH design, and IH being IH, they had a great internal design group who actively disliked Ray Loewy. That's in the book.
Seriously?
Too. Oh yeah, I found some letters, and they did not. Well, imagine, right? You're working at this company, you're making F-12s, and you're like, that's beautiful. And then this guy comes in, and Ray Loewy was acerbic. Ray was very genteel and well-spoken, but if he thought something was ugly as a pig in a poke, he said, that's ugly as a pig in a poke. And he even was quoted later, he said, if someone wants me to design a tractor, it's cheap. He said, they're ugly. But if you want me to redesign an egg, it's $1 million because it's almost impossible, it's perfect. So Ray, no doubt, came in and said, y'all, your tractors are not great. He probably said enough things. The internal guys would be like, and now he did make a beautiful tractor, but over the years, the IH, their own industrial design department, did most of the work. They were very good. I mean, this is a beautiful tractor. So.
You know, it's interesting when you talk to some of the folks in the company, even today, about the design. I don't know if you remember seeing the autonomous concept tractor.
Yeah.
That was at the Farm Progress Show and made it around to various other events. As I understood, maybe somebody with the company in later years could support this or refute it, it was an intern who helped do some of the design on that tractor.
I will dig
with
into
it.
that.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Someone with the company told me that, and I had heard that to be the case. I did the voiceover on that concept video. I think it was about 7 minutes. But it was so locked up, uptight, undercover, that a woman flew in from London. We sat in our studio in Aurora. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Oh my gosh.
And then we sat and recorded that track. They didn't want it out there in the public. So it was just kind of an interesting experience for this announcer.
There was so much secrecy in development. I mean, the Axial Flow program in particular, it was developed in a garage with blacked out windows and that one was really interesting because the John Deere plant was right across the dike. So they literally at lunch could go stand on this mound of dirt and see what's going on. Like, hey, what's on the truck? So they locked that in a garage, and there was years where like 6 or 8 people could only go into that garage and see it. So secrecy is part of it sometimes.
It is a beautiful color combination, isn't it?
It's gorgeous.
I mean,
it's gorgeous.
I love the solid red of the 400. I'm not sure there's any tractor prettier than the 400, but if you want to bring in another color, it's hard to beat.
They did a great job with that, yeah. And I'm with you on the 400. I have a very soft spot for those sleek lines. That was perfectly done, in my opinion. So.
Anything else come to mind before we wrap it up here, sir?
I have one more thing I want to talk about, and that is this 1066.
Now you're going back in time. Oh, the 1066. I'm sorry. No,
let's see. Let's go over here. We'll use are you good? All right. So, and this is very personal. So Gary Kroltz from Greenwood, Wisconsin owns this and restored it. And Gary is my relative. And Gary had been working on this for years and years. And he sent me a picture in February of this year, and he said, I'm done. And he did a beautiful job. This was, I believe, a family tractor, and I don't remember that for sure. But I got a call from Gary's granddaughter, and Gary, unfortunately, shortly after he finished this, passed away unexpectedly. And I got a call, and they were bringing the tractor to honor Gary. And I know, I really think this is something that I see a lot in tractors. There's so many times I visit with a collector, Max, you've seen this, where somebody makes a tractor, restores it to honor their father or their grandfather or someone they cared about that's gone. And I think this is really universal to this hobby. And certainly the fact that Gary's family is here with this means a lot to me and is a tie to the hobby.
You know, the generational use of these tractors, I think, is something that really sets it apart. You mentioned something being a little bit different. You don't see this with the old car crowd to that extent. You know, I think it's the fact that we worked with our parents, with our aunts and uncles, with our grandparents out of the field with these machines, and there's that attachment that you just don't find otherwise.
So, are you ready to wrap?
Yeah, I mean, it's in your hands, pal.
All right, well, we got one little thing.
We want to plug your book, for one thing, before we wrap up here. That's one thing I want to talk about.
Come, you can't miss me. We're in the hall. Max, I'm going to drag Max there. Come back to our booth. Our booth is in as you come in. It's Octane Press. We have some free prints. You can have Max sign it, and of course, we have books that I'm happy to unload. With this tractor, I was thinking about a way that we might honor, for all of us, the people that we care about that aren't here. And my wife actually suggested this, and I think it's really appropriate. Max and I have talked about it. And we'd like to take 1 minute, just 1 minute, and each one of y'all turn to your neighbor and ask them why they're here. I think more than, in a way, Gary was a loquacious, he loved to talk, and I think it's really appropriate, and I think for this crowd it's pretty appropriate. Everybody I meet here loves to talk.
Do that for just a minute. Lean over to that person maybe you don't know, or maybe you do, and ask them why they're really here.
About 30 seconds. Oh, you know what a minute is. I'll follow you. Hate to interrupt him.
We may want to continue that discussion. You know, I think I've seen something like this done in church before, but you're not going to pass the plate, right?
No passing the plate. Though if you want to give me a couple of bucks, it's fine.
I just want to say, along with Lee, what a privilege it is to be here with those of you who share this interest with us. We learn from you. We derive inspiration from you, I must tell you. Sitting with you, hearing your story, hearing you talk about the good years, the challenging years, the family stories that come to mind, the loss of a farm sometimes, the loss of a loved one, but the recovery from that. I think we come away, and maybe some of you do too, somewhat inspired after this experience of being together. So, Lee, I hope you'll join me in saying thank you so much for what you do for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all.
See you on the TV.